With former President Trump being banned from mainstream social media sites like Facebook and Twitter following the January 6th attack at the Capitol, many of his supporters flocked to right-wing websites to build their followings there. But the Washington Post put together an analysis of what is actually happening on those sites. So joining me this morning to talk about this is Drew Harwell with the Washington Post. Good morning, Drew.
Hi, good morning.
All right, so let's start off with the analysis you put together for this.
Yeah, we looked over the last year of follower counts, as simple as that, for sites like Gab and Gitter and Rumble and Telegram, all of these alternatives to Twitter and YouTube, where a lot of sort of Trump supporters, but also QAnon people and anti-vax people moved to. And they had a big jump after Trump himself was kicked off Twitter and Facebook after the January 6th riots at the Capitol. But then their follower counts kind of fell apart and they plateaued and some even declined. And that has a lot to tell us, I think, about the value of deplatforming and the challenge for a lot of these kind of extreme voices in building an audience long term.
So do you think that these sites, initially attracted a lot of people because it was more like an echo chamber? You can go on with most people having the same opinion as you.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing, right? I mean, they felt like they were being censored on these mainstream sites, and they thought that they could join with people who agree with them in one place, and they all started to do it. But, there's something really boring about being in a place where you all constantly agree with each other. And part of the joy of social media and part of the danger of it too is that you get conflicting voices and conflicting opinions. And so the analysis kind of suggests that being in a place where you don't have that kind of conflict and that kind of tension and also ability to learn and see other viewpoints can get a little boring over time, and that pushes people away.
And what do you make of lawmakers joining these kinds of sites?
They're doing a big bet, right? You see a lot of Republicans and conservatives like Rand Paul who are saying, I'm not going to use YouTube anymore. I'm done with that. I'm moving on to these other sites. But there's a danger because, just preaching to the choir is not really what you need to do to get elected, raise funds, build an audience. So there's a danger there in kind of shunting yourself into this echo chamber where you're just talking to people who already agree with you. It's not really a way to build political consensus or build a following, which is what you need to stay in office.
And are these sites fueling the misinformation, surrounding the 2020 election, COVID, and other conspiracy theories? Because people who maybe aren't familiar with these websites and these social media platforms, I feel like that's all you hear is it's just a bunch of false information and conspiracy theories. So is that actually what is happening?
Yeah, these sites, I mean, when you go on there, this is, people went to these sites because they were getting kicked off of Twitter and Facebook for sharing lies about the vaccine or lies about the election. These sites encourage that. They allow people to talk like that. They don't kick people off for sharing that sort of thing. So you're seeing, all of the kind of fringe voices are gathering in these places, and you're seeing conspiracy theories just constantly. And so, but there's obviously a ceiling to the number of people who want to talk about that and who agree with that stuff. And so that's why you're seeing in the data that they're not really able to recruit as many people into believing these lies about the election or the vaccine. And so I think that's encouraging from a truth standpoint, but it also suggests that there's more work to come in terms of addressing those conspiracy theories at the root.
And with the analysis that you did, what was the most surprising thing you found?
I was surprised to see people like Donald Trump Jr.'s audience declining. The president's son, who was always such a big voice on Twitter, he and many others were sort of kicked off Twitter. They regathered in these places. And, they still are just as active in talking, but you're not really hearing from them as much anymore. And, you obviously are not hearing from President Trump on Twitter anymore because he's no longer there. So, there is a reason why these companies turn to what they call deplatforming. And we're seeing some evidence that it works. It's not perfect. It doesn't, address the core issue of why there's a demand for these kinds of lies to begin with, but it does suggest that the mainstream platforms do have a power and a responsibility to encouraging good dialogue, and that sometimes this kind of tool can work.
And Drew, last quick question for you. Do you think these type of platforms are going to stick around? Is this going to be a thing that's just going to be there forever?
I think something like it will always be there forever, right? I don't think we just want one place where we're all talking. I mean, there is a monopoly danger there too. But they're a challenge right now because there are so many different kinds of companies, like the ones I've talked about. They're all competing over a limited niche. And, as people we talked to said, what they're offering is kind of a one-trick pony. If you want a place where you can just talk to other Trump fans on a website, you've now got almost too many options to gather around. And so building an actual, social network that you can to find people and have those network effects, have your friends and family and all your favorite influencers, that's not easy to do. So I think some of these may fall away as the business gets a little more saturated, but I think there's always going to be a place for this kind of discussion to happen on the internet.
All right, Drew Harrell with the Washington Post. Thank you so much for joining us this morning and kind of just breaking down what these places are for.
Yeah, thank you for having me.